Okay, let's get started. I think it looks like it's 3 o'clock. So I'm James. I'm the founder of Arca Solutions, the developers of eDirectory. And also we have Emerson here today, who's our marketing manager. And today we will talk a little bit about data acquisition and how to populate your online directory, which is a super important topic for eDirectory. Okay. So first, just a little bit about why this is so important. And it really is core to the product and core to the business model that generally everybody uses with eDirectory. It's at the end of the day, when you think about it, a user is coming to the website to learn some information, to find a guide. And so the data that you have in there is the core of that. It's really probably the most important thing, more important than your design and anything else. We'll talk a little bit about Craigslist in a minute, but if you go to some of those sites, it has enormous, huge traffic, and the design is really lackluster, but people go there because the quality of the data. So always remember that the data is just extraordinarily important for your directory. The other thing is it's not just for your user, but it's also for bringing users to the website. Today, basically, Google sends most of the traffic to the directories. And so it's super important that you have good content that attracts Google, and the data is a very big piece of that. All right. Also, the data, you should think about it as an asset that you're building, the data that you're preparing yourself, as well as the user data. It's almost like, putting coins in the piggy bank. It's the asset that you're building. Part of your business is your brand, but also part of it is the content. And over time, as your data gets better and more comprehensive, as well as the user-generated data, all that kind of comes together, and it's an enormously important asset. And there are ways to certainly monetize it well beyond just selling listings and running the directory as well. So keep that in mind. Data is super important for the whole directory. One thing to always also remember is that the quality of the data is key. Today, data is everywhere. You can find just numerous directory guide sites all over the place. And so you need to set yourself apart. And the way to typically do that is via quality of the data. So always remember that it's very easy to just load in a bunch of kind of low quality data and then be done. But that probably isn't going to work because somebody else will have better quality, and that's what drives the traffic. And think about it, not just the quality of it, but why does somebody prefer your data? Why does somebody prefer your site? And that comes back to a lot to the curation of the data. Maybe it isn't even that you have everything, but you have a certain type of thing that makes it easier for people to know they're getting what they want. And that may be a luxury experience, or your site may be about deals or something cheap. A low cost is the curation there. So there's a lot of different angles that you can come into for curating, but think about why does somebody prefer your website, and build your data around that. Quality typically boils down to 4 separate things. The first thing is, do you have breadth of data, all the listings available for the markets that you're attacking? You don't need to have every piece of data in the whole world, but you need to say, what market are you going after? And then think, do you have everything that's possibly out there for that market? And you can restrict the market. Typically, market is restricted in a couple ways. It's often restricted by geographic area. So you can think about it. Okay, I'm going to go global, and then you can narrow it down. I'm going to go for one country. And then you can narrow it down. I'm going to go for one state or one city. And then even within cities, if you're a highly populated city, you can go to certain, certain neighborhoods within a city maybe and build a really niche site about that. And then you have it gets easier to get full breadth and quality for that specific area. The other way people narrow it down is typically by categories. And so maybe they don't do everything in the whole world. I remember when we first started, eDirectory years ago, and people would always call up and they'd be like, "Oh, I want to be the next Yahoo." And I would always say, I don't know if that's such a great idea. Why don't you focus on something specific? And so you can narrow it down. Hey, I'm doing everything, or you're building a guide about a very specific segment. That typically works as well. But have the quality within what you're doing. You need to nail the quality within that area. And you can always expand it later. You can expand both the geographic area as well as the breadth of listings. Depth is the other thing that is super important about each listing. Do you have every little piece of information that anybody could possibly be interested about that listing? What year were they founded? How many employees do they have? What products do they offer? What brands do they work with? What hours do they open? The list goes on and on and on that you can think about. So those are the first two sort of things that come into quality. The third one is typically, is the data quality, is it error-free? And sometimes you just have sort of data issues, scraping issues or whatever with the data. The data isn't complete, whatever. But often, business addresses, phone numbers, contact info isn't up to date. I read a while ago, I think that the average US business moves every 5 to 7 years or goes out of business or whatever. And so if you think about that, if you're not putting time into your data, 20% of your listings may go a little bit stale every single year. So it requires some work to keep the quality up. And then the last thing about the data is having something that's sort of unique or that nobody else has, the gold. And so why is there value there, the data that you're providing? Is it hard to find? Was the data sort of tedious to put together? One thing that you can do that's often easier to do and that I've seen become a major competitive advantage for people is it well curated? And I mentioned that a few seconds ago. But have you really thought about the angle that you're applying to the data and made sure that all the data is really done well around that, all the information that's needed to both restrict data that isn't within that curated segment, but also presenting the information in a way with descriptions and language that sort of hits the segment that people are looking for. So think about that. The quality overall. Just is there something extra instead of just data in there? Okay. So preparing your data. The first thing is I recommend putting a strategy together. Getting anything done, it requires a plan and a strategy. And so typically there's a couple pieces to that. The first one is just, what are your goals? And it's important that you think about that before you get started. Like, what do you intend to do? The second one is the initial build out of the data. And then the third one is typically how you intend to sort of maintain it and keep the quality up on an ongoing basis. So as far as goals go, first there's probably a depth goal. What fields do you want to offer? And I'd recommend thinking about this up front. What's the ideal situation? You may not be able to fill them all in initially, but at least understand what's out there. Spend some time really designing it. And eDirectory has a feature, where you can add additional fields to listings, etc. So I recommend putting the time into really getting that planned. And then the next thing is sort of the breadth goal to the data. Which markets are you going to attack? And I always recommend starting small and then sort of growing later. And I wanted to just mention Craigslist, which I know in the US is a huge site that everybody's familiar with. It has a very antiquated design, but it works for them. And the story with Craigslist, I mean, it's actually an enormous business. I know it does. I've heard it does. They don't publish any figures. It's a private company, but I've heard they do over $500 million a year with just an insane like 40% profit margin, something like that. And they essentially decimated the newspaper classified industry. And the way that they did that, basically anybody, jobs, housing, all that kind of stuff that people used to put in a classified in a newspaper, nobody spends that money and does it anymore. Now they put it on Craigslist. And they were so smart about about the quality and making sure that they didn't go too big. And so what happened was first they started with a specific category in a specific market. And I think it was, I don't know, finding a house or finding a job in San Francisco. And they really went down that path with that one market until they had the model figured out and had a user base and they really understood it. And then what they do, they expanded next to the next market, I think, which is New York. And then slowly after that to other major cities. And then now they're basically everywhere, even sort of international at this point. And so set your goal and think about how you're going to do it, and set a timeline to it. What is your, what dates are you going to sort of go and say, hey, listen, I'm going to spend Q1 this year building out this market, and then in Q2, we're going to go to market 2 and 3. And one thing I wanted to mention here, I should have mentioned at the beginning, if anybody has any questions or comments, just pop them into the QA area there. And we'll pick them up either at the end or I'll stop and pick them up if anybody has any questions or comments that they want to add. Okay. Okay, so the initial build, the first thing is it doesn't happen by itself. I've actually seen people set up a directory and just kind of leave it empty, and they're like, how come nobody's signing up and adding listings? I made them all free. Nobody's adding it. And so people's time is worth a lot, and they're not going to add a listing even if it's free. Unless you're really presenting them some value. And the other thing is it's a little bit tough to control the quality. As you get going, the free listings will appear, and then that'll be your momentum over time. But to get started, it doesn't happen by itself. You need to really jumpstart it, put some gasoline into it, some lighter fluid, and get this thing going, and then the snowball will start to build over time. The first thing for the initial build is we recommend you think about SEO, especially with the category structures, because and that's search engine optimization. And the reason for that is different keywords have different traffic. And so, car versus automobile, there's very different amounts of people searching for those within different groups. If you're doing like a local guide, like cuisine types, even within like industrial segments, people doing industrial guides, you'll find that the search traffic is often weighted towards certain products or certain keywords within products, and so you want to get those featured somehow in your category structure. And if you don't do that up front, you can change it, but moving those URLs and things around after you're launched, it can be detrimental to the search traffic. So it's better to think about that up front. Second, build or buy a list of how do you get the list? Acquire the list. And then third is improving the list. And then fourth is sort of sending it out to the public, to your listing owners, to businesses to sort of claim and update their listings. That's sort of the general overview of how to get this moving with your data. And now we'll go into some specifics. First, list acquisition. There's a number of ways to do this. This works really well. You can just sort of manually search and build a listing. You can go to Google, just go to what areas or what segments you're going to, go through and do the work, put it in a spreadsheet, and then import it into eDirectory. That's certainly a great way to get started. It works well. I'd say a high percentage of our customers do that, especially the more niche directories do that. It works pretty well. The second thing is you can do a scraping tool. There's a bunch of desktop or web-based scraping tools that essentially go out to other websites, Google, etc., scrape lists of data, and then you can import those. You need to be very careful about copyright law. I can't give you any legal advice. It depends on market. I'm not a lawyer. Generally in the US though, I believe that public information like name, address, that kind of information is public. And so you are able to scrape that and start from there. So let me just see, I had a question come in here. Let me take a look at that. Give me 1 second here. Give me 1 second to check the question. I have a niche market, but I have a limited language for the directory. Most customers will be Dutch speaking. How do you approach this? Just go at it. I'll give you some more tips here for it, the limit on the language, there's a bunch of ways, especially Dutch directories. I think people speak both Dutch and then probably other languages as well. So there's a bunch of ways to do that. You for SEO, if you're doing multiple languages, typically it's better to set up multiple sites because they get better SEO. That's what we found over the years instead of just having people switch between site. However, sometimes people just put the title of the listing and then in English and then other language description right in there. There's a bunch of ways to do that. I'm hoping I'm answering the question about the language. The other thing is I would really focus on one language at the beginning and then you can add the second language later rather than doing that. Let's see. So I hope that answered that for now. And let me jump back to the presentation. Okay. So scraping tools, be careful about copyright law. It depends on the area, but generally you can probably at least scrape name, address data for those, and then you scrape it and adjust it, etc. You can just research that on Google and figure out how to do that if that's the way you want to start. Also, you can make a partnership with an organization. We've seen this work well, where often there's trade organizations for certain segments, as well as chambers of commerce and other organizations. And if you go at it like, hey, listen, we don't just want your customer list to spam you or your member list to spam you. We're actually going to build a tool for them to gain more visibility, and we want to be a partner with you. You can often get that deal worked out. Let's see, list broker. This is one of the most popular ways people get started as well, where they actually go out and buy a list from a list broker. And there's lots of different list brokers out there. And then once you get the list from the list broker, you can go in and augment it to make it your own and improve the data in there. So there's a number of different list brokers. Info USA in the US has typically been a top quality broker. They have an online interface where you can go in and search for data both by location and category, and then they'll tell you, oh, there's 642 listings available, pizza in New Jersey, or some biomedical companies in the US. They'll have a list of that, and you can go there and they'll charge you per listing. It's very expensive typically, but for a niche directory, it may just be worth the cost to do that. If you're doing like nationwide, it's going to be probably pretty prohibitively expensive, but it may be worth it depending. They'll tell you how many are available. Even if you don't use their data, you may go check it out, because then at least you can use it to set the goal and say, oh, now I know that there's 10,000 listings and where I'm going, and then how many do I get? And then you get the data from somewhere else to set your goal. Axiom is another big data vendor. They have data from Yellow Page companies, et cetera, in there. Very enterprise sort of level data vendor. Dun & Bradstreet is the next one, D&B. Another very big one that's available. And one thing you can ask about the data, if you talk to a salesperson there, is the data phone verified, or how is the data done? Some of these companies just scrape the data. Some of them have a process. Some of them actually phone call, verify all the data in their database, and it has a lot of fields and it's pretty good quality. Hoover's is another one. Citigrid, Yelp. Yelp, in addition to just the data, I didn't even know Yelp offered the data. Emerson told me that not too long ago. But one other thing Yelp has is a plugin that actually goes on your website where Yelp actually feeds the data into your directory. I think and you can use that. We have a Yelp plugin. I think we actually sell a plugin for that. You want to be a little bit careful about that, because the way that they do that is they try to drive traffic off of your website into Yelp. So sometimes those plugins where it's a little bit too easy, you're just like, I don't know if I want to do that. But sometimes they have an API, and other companies have an API, maybe not Yelp, but other companies have an API that you can use, and it works out pretty well for that. And sometimes you want to use it temporarily to just give your director a full feel, and it works for that as well. There's a couple very low quality data vendors. This Oddity Software is one, very, very low quality data. I think it's just scraped data. A lot of it is old or doesn't work or whatever. But if you're just trying to get something started and show that the directory isn't empty, and you'll later take it down, that may be a way to start. Or if you want to use it to seed some other effort where you're manually going through, that may be a way to start as well. The data supplier, I think, is another one that's fairly inexpensive. So after you have the initial data, manually, what I'd highly recommend is manually update or fill out listings in every category yourself, at least on the homepage, et cetera, so that the directory looks really good. If the directory doesn't look good, it's tough to get momentum and get things going. And then if you have a small number of listings, like think about it, if you have like 3,000, 5,000 listings, like you can stay on top of that yourself. If it's 10,000, maybe you need a small team to do that. Most of the B2B publishers that we work with, even, if they have a list of that type of size, they just handle it, and they have a staff that does that, and handles it and updates it and builds it out, and even phone verifies, calls the customers, downloads images from the websites, does a little Google search on the name address, figures out what the website is, that kind of thing, to get the data done. If you're really trying to do this in scale, you can outsource it. And there's a number of ways to do that. You can hire freelancers. We've seen that work pretty well. You can pay them on a per listing type basis, X dollars or whatever a listing. And then they just go out and do it. And you need to give them a set, you give them the base data, and then they go out and improve the list. Outsourcing is another way where you actually hire a big company that goes out and just, puts a team on it, and they kill it after a period of time. Or what also works, and this is more part of the ongoing maintenance that I actually don't talk too much about, but as part of the sales process, you can have the sales reps call up, and it's a great intro. Hey, we just want to verify some info about your business and give you your listing, et cetera. And they go and verify it all, and then they update it and improve it as part of the sales process. And that's really the way that you sort of maintain the quality of the data. And if they didn't get a no answer on the phone and the business moved or whatever, they can just take it down or change the address. There are a lot of companies out there that do data cleaning. We don't have necessarily a specific recommendation, but if you go out to Google, you'll see a whole bunch of them. I saw a question come in here, so I'll stop for 1 second and check that. Do you have a market number for what something outsourcing cost per listing? Yeah, outsourcing cost per listing, depending on what you need done and how many there are. And so it's going to cost a lot. If you're looking for like somebody to build out 200 listings, the cost per listing is going to be fairly substantial. These people have costs to just talk to you about it and sell it, and then 200 listings, how much time is it going to take? What I would recommend is you personally do a couple listings yourself and figure out like how long does it take. And after you've only done a couple, it's going to take more time than you think. And then figure out, okay, it took me 10 minutes to do a listing. What's the cost per hour of this person? If I send it out overseas, what's that going to cost per hour? And then you can kind of figure out you can kind of make an estimate on it. But I would recommend testing, because the pricing's all over the place, and you may find it's worth to pay more to get somebody that actually sort of is a person that and just instead of some of this like headless sort of machine that's out there crunching the thing and sends it back. The other thing that I would recommend is when you're building the data, it's probably better to do it in sort of phases where you put it in the spreadsheet first and then you import it rather than doing it through the interface. But if you're putting in a bunch of extra fields, then you probably need to use the interface. So think about that as well. But you can find a system that works, and over time you'll get that improved speed-wise. So hopefully hopefully that answered that question. All right. Let me start here again. And so anyway, yeah, to find the companies out there, you can do some Google searching. There's a whole bunch of little companies out there that do that sort of stuff. There's a very, very interesting service called Mechanical Turk from Amazon, and I recommend you check it out. It's a little bit complex to go in and figure out how it actually works. I think Amazon originally used it as part of building out their own listings on Amazon.com years ago, and then they sort of offered it as a service that they sell to other people. But essentially, they have an army of workers out there, all over the world, and you can decide how much you want to pay them. Like, oh, I'll pay 30 cents a listing, and then you set the price yourself. And hey, I want you to take this address, research it, and find a website for it and a phone number, or mark it no phone, no website, and go through and do the list like that. And then you pay them X cents per listing, and they can do it in scale 24 hours a day. And so that's pretty effective as well for if you need some specific pieces of data built out. Okay. Finally, email the listing owner to claim and update the listing. And you can do this regularly as part of your sales process. And it's sort of a thing like, hey, listen, you're featured on our directory. Click this link to see your listing, and go through here and you claim your listing, and then they'll update the data. Is this correct? Is your address information correct? That kind of thing. It's a pretty good business strategy to go through and do that as well for that. And one other thing I want to mention, we're getting to the end here, but one other thing I want to mention is just images are super, super important. Airbnb, one of the things that they did originally was they actually paid photographers to go out to individual listings, and they're getting started to set the tone, set the quality for the listings on the direct. They just said, hey, we're sending a photographer over, and they had a lot of startup money, so a lot of venture capital money, so they were able to do that. But images are important. Google likes them. Quality is super important. Recommend putting some time into those as well. And yeah, so that's how to do it. And the last piece of this really is just it takes some time and some work, but you're building an asset there, and it's the reason that there's value that you're creating is it's not that easy. So stay at it and build it out, and don't spread the peanut butter thin. Go sector by sector, category by category, market by market, and really make a good guide. Okay, we had a question come in. Let's say in 10 years, how will the template evolve? How will my data evolve with the template? Yeah, so we're constantly working on the base code. We're trying to build it out, add more features. We have a lot of stuff coming. New mobile apps are on the way, et cetera, et cetera. Your data will stay in the directory. We'll make sure version to version that the data updates and moved over. You can upgrade, especially if you don't do any customization. The upgrade path is pretty smooth. So yeah, your data should evolve. Also, you can do the custom fields and add fields and move the categories around, et cetera, for it. So your data in the directory should grow with the system, with the software. So I hope that answered it. If nobody has any more questions, will crypto payment be possible? Yes, we are looking at crypto and how to get that in there. We will probably use a payment gateway, Stripe or something else in the future. May have some support for it. We are constantly investigating that. We know crypto is hot today and people are interested in it. So crypto is certainly something on our radar and something in our plans. We expect what will happen is that actually, I think PayPal just announced that they take crypto, and so it may be that that we expect that's how it'll be in eDirectory, is that the payment gateway will take the crypto. I would like some info on the eDirectory roadmap so that I can plan to launch in custom development. When can we expect the next version? Major features going to be, what features are going to be truncated, et cetera. Yeah, so I can give you a very high level overview now. I'll just do that in 2 seconds here. Some of it we don't put out there publicly until it's until the roadmap's been firmed up. But the things that we're working on now are a new experience for the mobile apps, an entire rebuild for those. We are also working on some features to make the sort of the checkout process, et cetera, a little bit smoother so that you can upgrade and update, so that customers can order a basic listing or free listing and then upgrade that. So that we're looking at that area, that whole sponsor experience for that. And then otherwise we're working on just making sort of the directory system a little bit better for people that are doing sort of marketplaces. We're working on that, and a bunch of new widgets and improvements to layout and that kind of design. So I hope that answers that. And we'll have more data, more info on that as we go. For you, let's see. We have one from Chris for the mobile apps process new build. How will that work if we already had ours approved for iOS and Android? So when the new apps are ready, and it's probably going to be a number of months still, another 4 months or something. We're not quite sure on the timeline yet. We're still in the design process for it. What'll happen is you can just build the apps again and then submit them as upgrade to the App Store. So, and then in the App Store where it says like, oh, update this app, people hit the button and then it downloads and updates it. So it should be pretty seamless for your users. Approximate timeline for new mobile apps. We're still deciding how to get it out and what to be in there. By end of year is probably the safe answer to that is what we're hoping. Hopefully sooner than that though. So that's that. Okay. All right. Well, yeah, I guess I'd like to thank everybody for your time today. Thanks for showing up for the series. I don't know if Emerson has anything else to add here.
Yeah, James, we have a question on chat from Amy Senior. Do you provide a guide for clients to see all of the feature you offer so we can sell the max membership?
So we can sell the, let me see the question. You have a guide for clients so they can see the max membership. Oh, this is sort of the advertise with us page. I think we have sort of the default what's in the software, but if you're looking, you can create a custom page yourself that says what a client who's ordering a listing is getting. I think that's the question. Nearly everybody that does that, they write that content themselves because the listing has a zillion features in it. And a lot of them aren't that important that you want to highlight them in your marketing material. So you don't need to say, hey, your listing will include an email address. Like that's obvious. You can say, oh, this listing is going to include, photos and advanced placement, et cetera, for that. I think that answers the question. But I would say think about that yourself and what you're trying to sell, and put together a page or some content around that. That explains it. If you need more info, send us a note. Send our support a note. support@eDirectory.com, and we'll see what we can help with on that. You mentioned marketplace improvements. What kind of improvements for the marketplace? And so the marketplace improvements are basically a lot of people run these directories where a listing owner wants to feature a couple services they offer. Or a couple products they offer or something else. And so we currently have a buy button where you can add a little widget into the listing detail page, and then that can go to a scheduling app or some external payment thing or something like that. We're trying to make it so that it's better to offer multiple little products and services in the detail of the listing, so that you can sort of offer a marketplace for that and then split the payments where you take a percentage and then the customer takes a percentage. We're looking at how to do that. And we'll have some more info as that gets closer. Okay. Well, great. Well, thanks everybody for your time today. We have another webinar coming up in 2 weeks. Check back on the website, and if you need anything, send us a note, support at eDirectory. Emerson also pasted in his email there. You can reach out to me too. My email is james.chubb, CHUBB, @eDirectory.com. All right. Well, thanks. Have a great day, and stay on the data. It takes a little bit of work, but it's worth it. You'll see the directory and everything starting to work, and the traffic picking up and things starting to roll. All right. Thank you. Have a great day.